Hello and welcome back to Where Are All My Friends? This week's episode is with Caterina Nasr. She is an A&R at Fueled by Ramen and Elektra Records, and her story is one that I respect so much. She really worked hard to get to where she's at. She's been so passionate about music since such a young age, but it really took a while for her to find out the best application and the best fit for her in her professional career. And she tells that story so well, and she is so perfectly fit to be an A&R, but that really didn't come easy. And I love how she shared that story. And I just think she's an overall rad person and sets such a great example of being so passionate about what you do and the success that that can bring, matched with hard work. So let's leave it right there and get right into the episode. I'm so stoked to have her on. It's about time. Enjoy. Where are all my friends? Caterina Nasr.
Hello.
Yo, I'm so stoked on this.
I know.
It's been a long time coming, and this is an episode where we've known of each other, and we have a lot of mutual friends.
Yeah, a lot of my friends have been on this. Where are all my friends?
Exactly.
On this podcast.
Yes. And we were internet friends.
Yes.
But we really wanted to do this in person because you live in New York now, right?
I do. I'm based in New York, but I am in LA way too often.
Yeah.
But we've been chasing each other to get this done, so very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm always like extra stoked when like the episodes that are like bound to happen.
Like, yeah, it's like destiny.
Yeah,
this is also my first podcast I'm ever doing.
I wasn't sure. I tried to do a little recon on my guests.
No, I had one in high school with my dear friend Lainey.
Okay.
Where we would just like talk about Taylor Swift and like
you gotta.
But it wasn't like, you know, anything serious. But this is my first time like being a guest on a podcast.
Dang.
So I'm living for it. I love it. So
well, good.
I love podcasts, so I'm very excited.
It's very important to me. Like when I do somebody's first podcast, I want it to be a fucking rad episode.
No, we're gonna go in.
Yeah.
100%.
And I also try to have somewhat of an outline, but like learn your story in real time. So to start it off, for a listener who doesn't know who you are, a brief explanation of who you are and what you do.
Who I am and what I do. Well, my name is Caterina Nasr. I am originally from Houston, Texas. Grew up there, and then I went to college in Austin, Texas, at University of Texas. Yeah. And then I moved to New York in 2018 to work for Elektra. And have been doing A&R stuff there ever since. So it'll be 4 years in the summer. So I guess like a little over 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do A&R there now and work with a ton of incredible artists and coworkers there who are amazing. And we've gone through a lot of changes and amazing things over the last couple of years. But that is kind of the summation.
Yeah. No, that says it well.
Yeah.
And what instantly stands out to me, because again, the amount of times that there's a huge shout out to Johnny Minardi on this podcast is unreal.
The best.
But here we are again with the huge shout out to Johnny Minardi.
I mean, yeah.
But what stands out to me about you and like what I've heard about you specifically from him is just like your extreme hard work ethic and authenticity to just giving a shit. And it seems like, from what I know of your story, you really started at the bottom and you didn't have some guaranteed title and you just showed up consistently over and over again and killed it at your earlier positions, and that got you to the spot of A&R, and I'm very interested in that. Yeah,
I mean, I guess you have to start with like, I'm a kid of immigrants. So like my dad's from Lebanon, my mom's from Peru, but I grew up in Texas. So I think like the hard work, like no stopping kind of like American dream, for lack of a better word, thing is like just baked into who I am, because like I never like, I mean, when I was little, it was like doctor or lawyer. You will go to college and like education's super important in my family. My dad is like 2 PhDs. Like we're super big on going to school. So I knew that was always going to be my path. But working in entertainment was just like not something that ever crossed my mind. Like ever. So when I fell in love with it, and I wanted to be like on Broadway when I was little.
Whoa,
So my dad from early days was like, she wants to do something crazy. Like, who knows what it's going to be? And then when it was this, you know, I told my parents, I was like, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to half-ass it. Like, I'm going to go all the way.
Yeah.
And like, there's like, I promise you, like, I'm going to take good care of you and I'm going to have a legit job. So I think like that, like fire under my belly, obviously just like I think I'll get into like just being a big fan of music, but like it also just comes from like my upbringing and like being like obsessive with like,
it's also,
if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it big, you know?
It's like strangely like a pattern that I've noticed of when your parents are not from here and the American dream or whatever that is, you're not entitled to it, but it's something that like your parents like actively worked very hard on to give you an opportunity that they 100%. Didn't have. The amount that I see that theme in successful people that have that and just show up and work hard, genuinely, there's something really interesting to that that I've noticed.
You have a different perspective. Like I also didn't have parents that were like music heads. Like they like music. You know, my parents were like, they're all about gatherings. Like we always have people over and dinners and people sing at our house. So music's always a part of that kind of thing. But you know, people who are like, my dad had a huge vinyl collection and like collected records and loved Led Zeppelin and showed me classic rock. Like my dad listens to like Andrea Bocelli and like 2 Sting songs. Like he's not like and my mom, like they're not music heads. But my older siblings were. And I think my older siblings and I are a product of pop culture. And like just when you grow up in America, but your parents aren't from here, like all you're given is the TV and the movies and the music specifically that makes you be like, okay, cool. This is like where I think I belong. My brother was like huge pop punk head. My sister was like Britney Spears and NSYNC. And then I ended up falling in love with things I fell in love with, but it was all in tune with like what was huge at the time that they were teenagers. That just was so much a part of my sense of self because like that's how I like, you know, that was my connection to like growing up and figuring out who I was, in addition to like feeling a little bit foreign, but also being American, you know? And growing up somewhere like Houston, which like honestly is a really diverse place, but like, you know, it's still Texas. And I went to like Catholic school and like, you know, like we were like the kind of like of the otherness, like my family was a part of it. So music always felt like, and pop culture always felt like that place that I could like really, you know, find things and fall in love with them. And like, I look back on my life and I'm like, that started like from like 4th or 5th grade, even younger. Like I used to know every word to every song on the radio. Like I was obsessed with pop music, really.
To that point too, like, again, it felt to me like when I found like finding music that wasn't on the radio was one thing. And you're like, well, this is sick. But then like going to your first concerts and like that was one of the first communities where I was like, oh, like no one gives a shit who you are, where you come from. Like you're all just there because you love the same thing. And that I think is such a, finding that as a kid and like finding your own community, I think is so important.
I mean, that's the whole reason I'm here. You know, like in high school, I was such a fangirl. Like I had a Tumblr and it had way too many followers. It was very insane.
Oh, you like built a Tumblr?
Oh, I was like running a full-time One Direction blog when I was 15. No shame. Also not ashamed to say this because most people in my life and every artist I work with knows this.
Wait, how in the world would you be ashamed of that? That's sick. That's a flex.
Look, completely. But it's something that I started it when I was like 14, 15. Well, I guess to start about, that's when I found them, as I saw a picture of them on Tumblr and I was like,
what is this?
I think they're such good proof that if you're a star and you have charisma, there is just something otherworldly about you when a fan comes across it. When I just saw this photo of them, I was like, I need to know everything now. And people want to, that doesn't have to do with looks or anything. It's about like that, you know,
there's an energy,
je ne sais quoi, and an air about somebody. And I think from a young age, I was always able to identify that. But saw that picture, figured out who they were, watched every single X Factor video. What Makes You Beautiful had not come out yet. I X'd out of my blog, made it One Direction blog, and like, you know, ran it for like a couple years and found so many other artists through that, including Ed Sheeran, who will come into my story later. But that was also someone that I was like, this is gonna be the biggest artist in the world. Like, I've never heard a voice like this, songwriting like this. I always say like One Direction taught me fandom and Ed Sheeran taught me great songwriting.
Wow.
And I think I wouldn't be the A&R I am if I hadn't found both of those things at such a young age. And kind of watched them explode. Like those are both stadium acts. Like, and like to have been there from like inception and believe in them at such a young age and watch them grow. Like, kind of going back to like your first question of like, you've worked from day one. It's like, because I started in my bedroom watching things I loved. And I'll throw the 1975 in there because they're a huge band for me too.
Yeah.
Of like, I watched these things that I found so early and felt such ownership over, honestly, for lack of a better word,
Right.
explode. And honestly, a lot of, and all my friends in high school will tell you this, they were all like, Kat's like redhead singer-songwriter she likes, and like her little boy band. Like they're always been like, and then they were like, wait, you were like right about all those things.
Yeah, they're like, wait,
I told you.
That band we're hearing on the radio now, that was the one that you were talking about.
Exactly. So Tumblr, like you're saying, community and shows, like, you know, we were camping out for like bands and waiting in the cold and in the rain and like driving everywhere. And like, I went to New York to see One Direction on the Today Show. And like, I did crazy things, but it's because you're so driven. And I think now that I'm in this position, like I see where it's coming from, and it's all about community.
Yeah.
And it's all about, you know, surrounding around a great artist and around something that's a bit bigger than ourselves. And like, I always talk to the artists I work with about this. And I'm like, there are people in that audience that, you know, what you make and what you stand for is a huge part of their life. And like, we've all had that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's what really always fueled me to be like, you know, a bull with horns about getting to even this point and whatever point I'm going to next. I just like, I've always felt this like weight on my shoulders to give that to little Caterinas who are next, you know? And like,
yes.
You know, like it's, and honestly, like I say weight on my shoulders because it truly feels like an obligation. Like as much as it's a passion, it's also just like a little bit of a calling, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's a bit corny, but it's just like this idea of like, I got so lucky that I got to experience fandom and community and great artists and watch people blossom and have hit songs that I like felt attached to. And like, I think that can happen. It can and will always happen over and over again.
Yes.
And even like Johnny and I talk about it a lot because obviously Johnny came from like the Chicago scene and watched that whole pop punk movement. And then that trickled down to like, even today, all the hit songs on the radio are inspired by that era. And like, you kind of don't know that you're in a special era until you reflect on it. So I think like I get super nostalgic for like my Tumblr 2010s life. And I want, and I know that there's like young women, people out there that see someone like Chloe and Moriondo and feel that way. And it's just the whole reason I wanted to do this. That's why like there's such this like, you know,
that's cool.
Tenacious energy because I had it myself, you know?
That's really cool. And I think about this often of like that community, and Alexa was on the podcast and we talk about starting from a fan and being the power that has.
Yeah.
And how
the leg up it has.
Right. I personally get so upset when people discredit that as your start to it, because I think that's the most qualified position to be, is the kid that is an absolute authentic fan that's on the internet, that's finding all this stuff. It's like, that's the most qualified person that should be there.
Yeah.
And I think about this because I honestly feel a little out of touch now of like, I know that still exists. And I know that like, I feel like now every older person in music is like, oh yeah, TikTok. But I think that like what you said there of community, and I think like the people that are early there, that's something that I'm obsessed with. And I think that just the combination of fan and community is a timeless formula for being early and growing
identifying talent.
Special.
Yeah. And I think like, you know, for me, it's always like about seeing behaviors and actions that feel a bit like, you know, I work with this band I just signed called New Rules. They're managed by Modest Management, who developed One Direction and 5 Seconds of Summer and Little Mix and everything I've ever loved.
What a cool moment for you.
It's crazy. And they're amazing. But I watch their fans who are incredible. And the way that they talk about them, the way that they talk on Twitter or their TikTok comments, or the way that they engage with them, it just screams off the page like, this is something special. Because it's so rare to elicit that reaction and to get people moving. Like, especially now we're in such an attention economy. Like, you have so many options of things to stream, play, listen to, like if someone is taking the time to comment on a video, share a song, and say something like so passionate about it, like you're developing like an army, you know, for lack of a better word. And I think I always try to like, and like, you know, transition to another person I work with, Chloe, like it's similar that her fans, just the way that they talk and the way that they make memes and like do things that are just like, this is so unique. And like I agree with you. Like sometimes I even feel out of touch because I'm like, you know, like what side of the internet are they on? Am I on Discord? Am I on Twitch? Like, I'm not really on those things, but it's all about our job is to be adaptable and understand like the language is the same. It's just the platform it exists on that's different, and being really flexible and understanding that that's going to continue to happen. But like the way that fangirls and fans talk since the Beatles came off the plane in New York is the same. It's like the same. Screaming girls, signs are just the modern version of like all caps comments on TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know, and like
that's so funny.
That like, you know, I really think that's always what I look for in an artist is like if they're like starting those behaviors and like the camping out for the shows and like all the things that I did, you know, and I think going back to your point of like being a fan is such an asset, you know how important that is when you see that. Like you're seeing that and it matters more to you than maybe the average eye. And I think A&Rs normally either come from like a musical place, like they were either writers or musicians themselves or like thought they wanted to be artists or whatever, or they're just fans. And I'm most definitely the latter.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, even when I'm A&Ring records, I always say, I'm like, your fans are going to love that part, so you can't take it out. Like, and they're like, oh, but I'm like, yeah, well, listen to me.
Right.
You know, and I always say, I'm like, I'm always going to give you the fan perspective because I can't play any instruments.
Right.
I don't know how to out myself, but I can't.
I love that you own that, right? I think that's so important and powerful to just be like, well, cool, I came from this and I know this very well.
It took a minute to own it.
Truth.
It took a minute, you know, like getting comfortable with producers and writers to like speak what I wanted and say what I thought was best for the record. But you know, the best producers are people that are like, no, I need like the human perspective because I'm so in it with the technical aspects.
Yeah.
So I always just try to be like, how is this? Where are we listening to the song? Or is it like are you singing it in a hairbrush into a hairbrush in your room? Are you in a car with your friends? Like, where is the song going to get played? And where are real fans going to be absorbing it and honestly weaving it into their lives?
Yeah.
Because that's how you make hits. Like you create things that are just going to live with people and have them kind of be like a timeline of like their life. Like, you know,
here's a wild thing to think about. So we acknowledge that energy, right? The Beatles energy, the One Direction energy, like that, like it's there. The Mania. And it translates over and over again. It's the same feeling, different platforms. Where does that come from? Right? Like, can you engineer that, or is it just a thing like that? Like Justin Bieber, One Direction, like, can you engineer that? Or like, do you think that there are just certain people that are so fucking born and meant to be that in the world that it just universally translates?
I think it's the latter. Yeah. I think it's the latter. I think engineers, maybe not the word, you can support it and get it to that point. Like, I don't think things like Bieber, Jonas Brothers would have gotten to that level if they didn't have the right songs, the right people around them, the right choices they made, all that stuff. But like, at the end of the day, when you boil it down, like it is about charisma and it is about just being somebody that people want to pay attention to and feel a part of. And like, I think what's so crazy is it keeps happening over and over again.
Right.
And what's also so crazy is it's never someone from America, which is something I always point out.
Go on.
People go, well, what about Shawn Mendes? I'm like, Shawn Mendes is from Canada. Justin Bieber's from Canada. 5 Seconds of Summer from Australia. One Direction were British.
Taylor Swift?
I'm talking about teen heartthrob male sensations. The Beatles were from England. It's really hard. I mean, there's maybe a couple here and there. I'm talking about like superstar level teen male heartthrobs.
NSYNC, Backstreet Boys?
I guess, but like that was the 90s. Like, you know, they're the only ones. Actually, you just disproved my theory, but they're the only ones. But like BTS, like in the last X amount of years, it's all a lot of ex-US things. Yeah.
That's
I was always
crazy.
I'm super drawn to British music. Like you know, 4 of the artists I work with are based in London. 3 or 4.
Anybody listening to this right now has that moment where you wish you could scream into the podcast and be like, "You're forgetting this." Please let us know.
Yeah.
Because you just blew my mind with that. Where
but
I'm
even
sitting here
like,
and I'm like,
if you tangentially go into singer-songwriters, Ed Sheeran, Hozier, James Bay, like all these people are all, you're like, you
got me fucked up.
For those people like just listening, Andrew's eyes are like,
like I'm like,
yeah, no, I tend to blow people's mind with this. And it's like, it's just because I always get told like, you gotta sign more things in your own country. I'm like, nope. Absolutely not.
I'm thinking, and like, obviously we've had huge acts in the US, but like for this like crazy star power application, I'm like,
and people always say like, how come your taste is so non-American? I'm like, because it's actually, it's not just strategy. It's just truly my taste, which I think kind of proves my theory further that like I'm someone that's drawn to stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if I'm drawn to it, Louis Capaldi, sorry, another one. I could just keep going. But
so
I think I think it's because there's a level of, well, the fan is consuming something they feel is foreign, isn't like a boy that could be in their class. It's more like someone that they can daydream about.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean that in a romantic way, because I think that's another thing. And I want to say this clearly. I think everyone thinks fangirls just like things for the romance aspect or like the physical attraction aspect. It's so much bigger than that. Like it is about community, and it's about feeling a part of something.
Yeah.
And it is actually about, if we're going to get like real like down to it, it's also about like, this idea of like a non-threatening experience for a woman to be a part of something. None of these stars we're talking about are like big macho men. Like they're all like really approachable, kind, or like kind-faced people, if that makes sense. Like it's less about, I think people want to be really shallow about it and be like, well, they're just attractive, so people like them. That's why it's like girls are thinking about a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So
it's wild that you now understand it. Like you were there as the fan blogging about it, and now you're there working in it, and you can dissect
and
these
talking
areas.
like a scholar.
Right. Well, like you're looking at it very methodically, and you're like, it's this, and I can speak to my experience, and I can see what people would see on the outside, but there's actually this, and this in it as well.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a lane that, in all honesty, like I haven't really tried to dissect too much. I'm just like, that's pretty fucking crazy. Justin Bieber's selling a lot of stuff out, huh? But like it's really interesting. But another thing, because like I really love like you very clearly understand like fandoms and communities and like that feeling, and hearing you speak on that. But something else that I'm very interested in about you is your specific come up. So clearly, like you came from being a spot of being a real fan and going in and just building the tumblers and the growth of all of that. But I'm really curious, because I would imagine too that there's probably somebody listening to this podcast that's like, that's so sick. I'm a fan of music. I feel like I'm early. Like I'm early on music and communities, and like I want to be more than just somebody going to shows.
Totally.
So at what point in your life did you start to think like, whoa, maybe this love for music could translate to a job?
Yeah. So I was in high school, and then I, got into UT Austin for journalism and went there and, started going to school there, was still such a music fan. And I made like, obviously like my new set of friends in college, people that didn't know me before. And they were like, you know everything about music. And I was like, oh, not really. Because all of my high school friends, like my best friend Hannah from high school to this day is still like my back bouncing board for like sending stuff to. Like she's just like a music head and comes from like, her family was a musical family. So I would go to her house and her dad would be playing records and I'd be like, what's that? Like, So I always had pretty into music friends in high school. So when I got to college and met these new people, they were like, you like love this shit. And I was like, yeah. They're like, no, like I've never seen anybody talk about this the way that you do.
Wow.
And I was like, I think I needed that perspective of like new people in my life.
Interesting.
And my mom was always like, you talk about stuff in a way that I know you're my kid, but like this is weird.
You thought it was natural because you were just like,
I did.
What else
and even like, and like I would, my mom was like, to this day, she's like, the way you would talk about like they're a star. I was like, my kid's 14. Like, why are they talking like this?
That's funny.
It's pretty crazy, but I had this new perspective being in college, and luckily was surrounded by a lot of like awesome, ambitious people who were like interning and doing stuff. And like UT's an amazing place, and Austin has all sorts of like, opportunities in all kind of industries, but especially music. And I had a friend who was a couple years older than me, and she was like, this is all you ever talk about. I know this is what you want to do. And also, I guess I need to mention too that year, 1989, Taylor Swift had come out. Best album ever.
Get me started.
And I remember the album came out, and I was sat on my dorm room floor, and I was with friends. And the singles for that record were Shake It Off, Out of the Woods, and Style. Okay. I remember like the instant grats, the pre-releases. And then when the record came out, I was like, the two best songs on this album are Blank Space and Bad Blood. And I told, which like now as a Taylor fan, like disclaimer, if anyone's listening to this, like I don't think Bad Blood's a great song, but it's not my favorite Taylor song, but at the time I was like, this is definitely like a hit. And I remember one of the girls on my floor was like, how do you know that? And I was like, I just know. And then they both were massive songs. And she came back to me. She was like, remember when you told me that those were the 2 biggest songs? Like, how'd you know that? And I was like, I just knew.
You just feel it.
And I remember that was when I was like, why can I tell you what like the best songs are on a record? Like that like understanding of like, you know, how to pluck things and be, that's beyond, right, just understanding talent and a different talent. That's like artist development, you know?
And I think that like the fact that you own, you're like, I don't know how to play music or know specific instruments. Like I too, every now and then will have that feeling. And I think that like, I hope that people that maybe have that feeling as well don't think you have to know music to do it, because when you have that, it is like this intangible power thing.
100%.
Where it's like, it's intuition. It's just something. It comes from being a fan. It comes from listening to a fuck ton of music. You don't need to professionally be able to be like, this chord progression into this chorus. Like, no, like
I would also encourage people like, and I'll like get back to the train of the rise after this, but you have to train your ear to know those things. Sit down, go through old records you love, pick out which the singles were. Why were they the singles? What album track do you love? Why do you love it? Like ask yourself those questions and train yourself. I had no, like, you know, I had people later on mentor me and like on the greater level, but like I trained myself like in those years of just being like, I'm going to go find every record I like, figure out what label it's signed to, who's the agent, where they're from, like, and just become, honestly, like knowledge is power in this business. And I think like the more, like, you know, I used to think like my useless knowledge of all the things I liked was just because I was a fan, but it's proven to be and continues to be like something like even I was talking about the band I work with, New Rules. They're like, how come you know so many obscure like British alternative bands from 2016? And I'm like, because that's all I listened to.
Right.
You know, and they're like, it helps me develop their project because they're always referencing those bands. And I'm like, yeah, I know that song. They're like, I can't believe you know that song.
Yeah.
And I'm
but
like,
it's like that education comes pretty natural when you genuinely love it. But still, nonetheless,
and you're
it's
curious.
education.
The word is curious, you know? So anyway, had a friend. She was like, this is all you ever loved. You need to start interning. And I was like, I'm a freshman. Freshmen don't intern, which is really crazy. A lot of these colleges, and I don't know if it's changed now, but for me, like, first of all, music's full of credit only internships. And no college can give you credit until you're basically a junior or senior.
Yeah, that system feels kind of broken.
It's super broken. I hope it's changed. But at the time, I had to go through, and I'll get to this, but for my first internship, I had to go through a community college to get credit. And I basically paid to intern. Like I was paying for this college credit.
Right.
It was like a whole mess. But anyway, I was like, okay. And I went home that night and I applied to C3 Presents, which is a like promoter, concert promoter. They do Lollapalooza, they do ACL, and they have a bunch of the bigger venues in Texas, because that was the one place I knew from the grapevine was like the place to work in music in Austin. Okay. Besides like a South by Southwest situation.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm just going to apply to this. I got, you know, a response from the concerts marketing department, which was basically at the time, you couldn't even advertise on Instagram. I also sound old. I'm literally not old, but this should show y'all how quickly things have changed. Like this is 2015.
Wow. Yeah.
And you couldn't even advertise on Instagram. So like, that's really not that long ago for all intents and purposes.
No.
Like, so I get this job. The woman was like, I don't hire freshmen, but I like you. And I was like, okay. So I get this job and I sit in like a little dark room and like send out links on Twitter to like tickets on sale now, and like worked in like the back end of like their WordPress website. And I thought it was the coolest job in the world. I was like, this is so fun. And I was like finding new bands, because obviously like they work a lot of the smaller 350 cap, 200 cap, 500 cap rooms. I was like, whoever was playing those rooms, I was like, if I didn't know them, I'd go listen to them, and then I'd go back and I would just like start to find things. And for me, I was like totally happy doing that. But I was also like, this is like not what I want. Like I want to be closer to the music. And at the time I met a bunch of my fellow interns and we started a blog. And we would like, you know, cover shows, and I was like the pop alternative editor, because that was like when blogs were like cool and like all the rage. I met those fellow interns, which was a huge thing. Like one of those people is my really dear friend Austin, who's now like a director of marketing at Republic Records. Like another girl, Mickey, that I worked with, she works at Capitol. Like we all came up together, and I think that's a huge lesson, is like, do not try to go like don't be too pressed with going above you, like go horizontal and like,
oh, cool. Like lean into your network
yeah,
and be very okay with the people
yeah,
you're
like,
coming up with, because
yes,
you're probably the next ones.
yes,
Yeah.
and like know each other and like stick with each other, because you're gonna get, you know, you'd also never know who's you're gonna work with in some capacity. And like it's like meeting all those people at a young age was huge for me. And they were all artist management interns. I was jealous of them because I was like, I want to work in artist management.
But you're saying like instead of like chasing, like seeing the person with the super legit title when you're young and being like, I got to do everything to be with them, just like lean into the people that are your peers. Let's
be real. My supervisor at C3, like, you think she probably remembers me? Like, I don't even know.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
she was a nice lady, but like, Austin and I are still friends to this day. And he works at another major label. You know, it's like, it's a really, and you never know like what we're going to collaborate on one day. Like, our relationship is super valuable. And like, I think it wouldn't have existed if we had an intern together and I hadn't spent time getting to know him, versus like, you really only need a couple higher ups in your life to really have that meaningful relationship with. Yeah. You're going to need your counterparts you need lots of friends.
Yeah.
You know,
I think about that a lot, actually. I think about like the people that are interested in music or anything, actually. Yeah. Like you look at, you're always going to have the people that are like that step ahead and you're like, oh, it must be so nice. And you can chase that, or like you can really build a special community amongst yourselves. And then you kind of make this thing that like no one else can replicate. And it's the new fresh thing
and you learn
that
from each
everybody
other.
Wants.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We were all slowly figuring out what we wanted. Like I think Austin at the time, for example, was like artist management intern. I was this marketing intern. To be clear, I had no idea what A&R is at this point. I'm like 19. I have no idea what A&R is. I know record labels do stuff, but like I didn't know what it was. And I think that's also something like comfort people is like, once again, like you do not need to know what A&R is to like at such an early age to end up in that position. Like they want you to think that it has golden gates around it. They want you to think that you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you have to just follow your heart, for lack of a better, cornier statement. But, you know, I, after C3, kept hustling, went to a radio station. That was a AAA radio station, very big in Austin. And that was my first interaction with a label person, because they had the promo rep come in and pitch the records that they were working, right? And this guy from Capitol came in, was pitching Halsey. And he was like going in hard on like, she's a superstar, blah, blah, blah. And the program director just wasn't having it. She was like, I don't know. And I poked my head in and I was like, but keep in mind, I was a digital content intern. Why a radio station had digital content, I have no idea. But I was like, I don't want to be a digital content intern. I want to like program the music. Like that's way more my speed. And I was like, you should play Halsey. And she goes, what? And I go, she's going to be huge. And if you don't play it, you're going to kick yourself in a couple of years. Like you should play it. And like, even if you don't like that song, you should like her because she's a star. Because Halsey was on Tumblr with us. Like she talks about it. She's like a big One Direction girl, and like what was making music very early under a different name. And like I had known her from those days, and she always had this like thing about her. And the Capitol guy was like, yeah, what the intern said. And she was like, after the meeting, she goes, come in here. And I was like, I'm in trouble. I talked. She's going to be mad at me. She's like, sit down. I'm going to play you songs back to back. Yeah. And you're going to tell me what you think of them. Okay. So she did that. She's like, this song or this song. And I'd be like, that song. And I would explain why. This song or this song. That song. Explain why. And then she was like, when you talk about music, I want to listen to it. That's a very special gift. And I think you're an A&R person. And I was like,
that just gave me goosebumps.
I was like, what is A&R? I was like, thank you, but what is that? And she kind of explained it to me. She's like, it's the person that finds the artist and signs them and helps them develop their music. And I was like, that's a job. That's crazy. So that was like my first exposure, but still, once again, at that point was just like, I'm just interning for fun. Like, I don't know if this is what I want. So kept hustling, worked at that radio station on and off, worked for like a local manager who was amazing. This guy, Jake, who I'm still in touch with, lives in Nashville. And then he was like, I think you should go to an agency because that's the best exposure you can get. Yeah. And at the time I was booking a lot of local shows with local bands. Like that's another thing, like, I guess another advice point is like
common theme.
Get involved with your local scene.
Yeah. Common.
To be honest,
theme.
I don't keep in touch with, wasn't as lucky as Johnny Minardi to just like have Fall Out Boy in my hometown.
Casually booking them and fucking.
But I learned a lot and I booked gigs for like like frat bands and like all sorts of stuff. And I just learned a lot. And I was like, I love booking shows. Maybe I want to be an agent. No shade to people who decide to do that. Just not for me.
Yeah.
But applied cold, no referrals to this job at CAA, interning in their touring department. And I got a call back from their New York office, which New York was always my dream, always. And I got the job. I was one of 2 interns in the entire class with no referrals.
Holy shit.
So I guess like, I don't want to say luck, because at that point my resume was pretty like beefy to like get the job, but like, I don't know. It's pretty, I don't know if it would even fly now. I think now it's less nepotism-y. I remember getting there and like, I'm still good friends with the one girl that was non-referral, and we're always like, we're here. Like, how did we get here? Yeah. Intern there, met amazing people, hated the work. Yeah. Transparently, it just wasn't for me. I felt it to be really uninspiring. Don't like,
that's
okay,
interesting too, right? Yeah. Like, that's something that I've learned, maybe even, it's outside of music as well. It's any professional career. Certain times you hear a job title or like a specific position or area and field, and you're like, oh my God, that's it. I would love that. Oh my God,
booking concerts, going to concerts for a living.
And then you like go and do it and see the minutia, field and the minutia, perfect word for that. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, fuck this.
Yeah. And then you see someone who loves it and you're like, that's not me.
Yeah. And then you find another lane where you're like, I didn't expect this, but this is actually all the stuff I love. I think that's interesting.
Totally.
I've experienced that a lot myself.
I was under all the assistants there and they were all amazing. They're all people I still keep in touch with. They were so kind. Like, I always say, like, people are like, I loved the people at that job, but the work just wasn't for me. And I think at that point I was about to be a senior. I had done 10 internships.
Wow.
Like startups, managers, radio stations, concert promoters. Like, I had tried on every hat. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I still didn't find the hat that worked for me. Crazy. I was still like, I love music. I love this shit. I love working in the business. I'm fired up. None of this is for me. Where do I belong? Like, I felt a little bit like,
and you're how old?
I wouldn't say lost. I think I was 20.
That's interesting. So
I'm a little young for my grade. I'm an August birthday, so I was always turning later.
That's funny. But still, like, it's funny because, like, yes, that's young, but it's also like that's a long time to be very passionate about music and chasing.
No, and I was like ready at that point to,
and
like,
then to like
find what I wanted.
Feel lost.
Yeah. And also, like, keep in mind, going back to my Arab father, I had promised him when I graduated from college that I was gonna have a solid gig.
Oh shit! So the pressure was on.
Yeah, the pressure was on. So I get there, I meet a bunch of people I love. They had a weekly A&R meeting, which was my favorite part of the day. And I would like pitch bands and pitch artists. And like I said, I had a great time, but I was just like, it wasn't for me. And I went to coffee with one of the agents who works predominantly actually in the rap and hip hop world, which is less my lane, but he was wonderful. And he sat with me and I asked him, I was like, have you ever gotten a demo before? And he was like, oh no, you don't belong here. And I was he looked at me like, it sounds patronizing. He was amazing. It was not patronizing. He was like, you are an A&R and you can't come back here. Like, you're going to be miserable. I've never gotten a demo in my life. I'm an agent. And like, I knew that. Like, I knew the duties and skills and roles, but I think I needed someone to look at me and be like, honey,
that's not it.
Turn around and run for the hills because you don't belong here.
Massive props to that.
Because at that point I was like, I'll just come back here and be an assistant and work my way up and like maybe move to a label eventually. Because at that point I was like, I think a label is like the epicenter of the artwork and the single and the video and like all the things that were being close to a project and doing artist development and doing the, online first song out to stadium. Like, how do you fill in that gap, you know? Yeah. So I was walking around after that coffee, I was walking around the sports area of the office because they represent sports too. And I hadn't met a sports agent yet. And like, at this point you have to believe in like universe, you have to believe in like fate, all this stuff.
We're big on that on this podcast.
I'm super big on I'm like so big on that. I'm like the corniest big heart.
We're team manifestation and the unspoken energy.
And team listening to those things. Yeah. Door was cracked open for like a one of the sports agents, and he had like a Michigan flag and like a record player playing Turn Blue by the Black Keys, one of my favorite albums. And I was like, he went to a state school and he likes music. I went to a state school and I like music. Like, I guess I'll just meet this sports agent because I hadn't met anyone in sports yet. So I set up 15 minutes with him. I go to his office. It's this guy, Jeff Filiberto. Shout out to Philly. He's the best. We love him. And we just like totally hit it off, had a great conversation. And he was like, I really like you. I want to help you. Like, what do you want to do with your life? And once again, I think I also needed someone to just like straight up ask me that.
Yeah.
And I felt this like core, so cheesy, but I was like, I have to tell this man about finding Ed Sheeran. Like that was like my first thing I felt.
Yeah.
I was like, when I was 14, I found Ed Sheeran. It changed my life. I knew he was going to be the biggest artist in the world.
Yeah.
I heard the A-Team. I was like, this song's massive. And I watched it go from him opening for Snow Patrol in my hometown to like,
I remember that.
I know, iconic. He actually canceled all of his Texas shows, so I didn't get to go, but I did have tickets to arenas to hit songs. And that was right when he had like that summer was like Shape of You and all like his biggest moments that had come out. And I was like, and I want to do that. I want to develop artists. I want to watch them go from, I always say like planting in the mud to like sprouting to trees to forests. Like I want to watch that process and kind of be with an underdog, honestly, because Ed was an underdog and kind of be like, oh, that's never going to work. And then everyone has to watch it work. I think that's the sickest stuff ever. So and have a little bit of like a left of center perspective on it. And I realized now after all this time, and I had given him like a brief summary of all the things I've just ran you through of what I had done in the intern sphere. I know I need to go be an A&R at a major label to do that. Because also I had pretty alternative taste. So I was like, maybe I'll go to like a Matador or like an indie record, Dead Oceans. Like I liked that stuff. Yeah. Which kind of ends up playing into my relationship with Chloe later on because that's all the stuff she liked at the beginning and I liked. Oh, cool. But I realized like through that CAA internship, like, no, I want to work with pop stars. Like I want to work with like I want to be at Madison Square Garden. I didn't want to. You want to
play a big game, yeah.
I didn't want to be at Stubbs Barbecue, and, I wanted to be, And he looked at me and he was like, "You should meet my best friend from camp growing up. He has worked with Ed Sheeran from day one. He runs Elektra Records. His name's Greg Nadel. I think he'd love you." And I was like, I would love to meet this man you speak of, who is currently still my boss, which is pretty crazy. I know that was like, so that will have been five years ago this August. So then I moved my flight because Greg was like only available this one day. And I was like, no worries. And I was like going back home to Texas. This is like the very end.
The casual, like, can you meet on this day? And you're like, totally. Sure. And you're like moving all of your travel, everything to be like, it's the perfect. The timing is great. To go meet this guy. I go into my first footstep into a label building ever. Yeah. Which is also proof. Like people say like, oh, you have to intern at a label before you work at one. I didn't, so I don't really know. Met Greg, who is my boss, and for those that are listening, the head of the company still to this day. Yeah. And had the best conversation with him, and was so inspired by him, and just like really got on with him well. And I asked him challenging questions. Like I was like, I've been an Ed Sheeran fan since the beginning. What's up with this pop stuff? Like, what's going on? Like, he was like, Ed's wanted to do this from the moment I met him. Like, it's not an accident. And I was like, well, the fans are like confused a little bit. Because at the time it was like so jarring, Mm-hmm. And now maybe people all look at him like a pop star. But at the time it was like, this is a singer-songwriter transitioning into a more pop sound. And he was like, no, I like that. You're like, I was like asking him like, and then how did that happen? And then whatever. Was that like, because that's what a wildly pivotal, important meeting in your life. Yeah. Did you go into it thinking it was a job interview, or like, how was it set up? Were you nervous? More like
I was so nervous. Oh my God. I was like, my heart was beating.
Did you know what to wear? Did you go casual? Did you go semi-professional?
I think I went.
How much time did you have? Like, I'm so into this
I was
moment.
Like, so I got there like 20 minutes early, and I sat at the Starbucks across the building, and then I got in there and like just like I think I wore like something like, music industry is tough, right?
It's very tough. Like, that's why I want these specifics.
Especially as a girl, you're like, do I like stunt with an outfit? Do I do something? I think I wore like black jeans and like a button up top, and like I did come up with my resume. Okay. I had it printed and I gave it to him. But it was mainly just like a conversation. Like that's what's so tough about the music business is there's such a blurred line of professionalism.
Yeah, you don't know when that conversation
is that.
Yeah.
Like what is happening?
So it felt pretty like out there. It wasn't like sitting there looking at like, I see you were in Texas.
It was a meeting.
Got it.
It was a hang. And I think that gets you the farthest in this business, is being just a cool, like knowledgeable person about what you want. So
out the rip, it's just like, cool. Like I met you through my friend.
You have to keep in mind, like I also had a year left of college. So like I'm sitting here like
It was more just like, maybe this guy will help me guide myself, or like maybe this guy will know, and maybe this is
maybe if it's not him, it's someone else. But
it sounds really corny. A&R thing.
But I knew like I was gonna work for this man as soon as I met him. He even says it to me. He's like, I just like, like I knew it. It's a little bit of like, you just kind of know. So I kept in touch with him the entirety of my senior year. And he called me in December and he was like, can you start in January? And I was like, no.
This is how long after that meeting?
This is like 4 or 5 months.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just this like
he was
instant,
not
I like you, kid, you're hired. It was.
Well, he knew I had college left.
Right.
I think he would have, but he also had an assistant at the time too. And he was like, and so he would call me and be like, hey, when do you graduate? When do you graduate? And I was like, May.
Right. So like, y'all had a connection.
Yeah, May, like every kid in the country. And I was like, but I can finish online. Like, what do you need? What do you need? And he was like, no, finish college. I want you to have a normal experience. Like, we'll figure out something for you when you're ready.
Yeah.
And then in spring break of whatever year that was, CAA called me and offered me a job. And I was like, at this point, I'm like, I don't want to go there. So I call Greg and I'm like, I was really forward with him. And I was like, CAA offered me a role. I don't want to work there. I want to work for you. Let me know what I need to do to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing too, is like, first of all, like going back to the Philly meeting, like I was like, I want to be an A&R. This is the story that made me realize that. Watching Ed Sheeran break. Do you know, like you asked me what I wanted. I'm telling you what I want.
Yeah.
And then same thing with him. Like, I don't want that job. I want this job. I think people overcomplicate it and you just really need to tell people what you want. Like, by the way, the hardest part is figuring out what that is, right?
That is. It is.
And it took me 4 or 5 years. I guess for my whole life. Because my whole life I was figuring out like this music thing is in me. What is it? Question mark. Yeah. Why do I care about this 500 million times more than all my friends and all my family?
Yeah.
And it's because it was something in me. So I think it's like taking the time to like get to know yourself. Like it's corny, but like is a huge way that you're going to move forward in this business and figuring out what your superpower is. Like, and leaning into it. Like,
and
that took me a while.
It doesn't come now, or it doesn't necessarily come instantly.
I didn't talk about the One Direction thing for like the first couple internships I had. I was embarrassed.
Whoa.
I mean, because
totally,
you're not made to feel like that's a cool thing.
But like us, like talking like this whole manifestation thing, or like the energy in the universe and listening, like I do think that so much is possible, but you do have to so clearly know your goal or your finish line, or that like, to be, what do you want, and say this.
My whole career changed when I started owning where I actually came from.
Wow.
When I started talking about my fangirl past, when I started talking about where my parents were from, those things that make me, like it changed my whole perspective on how I look at artists and music and how I talk to people. Like it really opened my eyes. And, that day I was like, I want to work for you. He was like, came back to me 3 days later and was like, here's the job offer. So signed an offer with him to be his assistant at, I want everyone to understand this, Atlantic Records, Elektra Records, an imprint of Atlantic with, I think he had 11 artists on the label. Which was an imprint within Atlantic. And he worked the entirety of the Ed Sheeran project. So I was like, oh my God, I'm like,
this is it.
This is great. What a great, like easy stepping stone into a label system, right? Like working for an imprint, working with one of my favorite artists of all time. This is amazing. I sat with him on the phone before, I really accepted the job. And I was like, I want you to know, like, I know you kind of do this like curated Americana singer-songwriter alternative thing, which is what Elektra was at the time mostly. But I want to sign a boy band one day. And I want to sign Shawn Mendes. And I want to work with pop music. Is that a lane that will be carved out for me here?
Whoa, cool.
Basically, like, will I be able to sign stuff to Atlantic?
Right.
Was essentially the question. And or like, do you want to expand Elektra? And he goes, no, that's great. I'm going to need that. And at the time I was like, it's a weird way to say that. But okay. I wanted to clarify once again what I wanted, because I don't want to compromise what I wanted. I wanted to be able to work with like big pop stars one day and do that kind of stuff. I take the job. A couple months go by. I'm in Lebanon visiting my family. I catch up on my music news. I'm like whatever, scrolling. There's an article from last week that's like Elektra Music Group and Elektra and Fueled by Ramen coming together to form Elektra Music Group with Greg, my now contractually assigned boss, and this other man, Mike Easterlin, on the cover. And I was like, what is this? So I text Greg or like call Greg or whatever. Hey, like, first of all, congratulations. Because it looks like you just got a big fat promotion. But also, are we good? Like, he goes, no, like, I mean, tell you, I just couldn't, you know, obviously. But, you know, I hope you're a Fueled by Ramen fan. I was like, it's only like everything I've ever loved in my entire life. Yeah. And suddenly that comment of like, I'm going to need that made sense, right? Because now we're our own label and we're separate from Atlantic and our roster is a majority alternative. With our biggest acts becoming 21 Pilots, Brandy Carlisle, and Panic at the Disco all at once, right? And still Ed, who kind of sits and straddles both places. But yeah, it just felt like there was this clear, honestly, lane for me to bring in young talent in the more pop-centered space, whatever that means. When I say pop, I don't want to mean like bubblegum. I mean like people who want to become, you know, like become You're that. Yeah, I get you. So yeah, I basically signed to a completely different company that it became, which ended up being like, and has been the last 3.5 years of my life and has been the greatest blessing ever. But I spent 2 months working at Atlantic and then we moved formally I watched the whole change. Like, holy shit. And I was Greg's assistant through all of that. Right. So he was going through a lot of changes. And I think I learned so much from that process and like absorbed and soaked in so much knowledge and watched like, you know, the Tones and I deal happen and like all these people come through our building and like worked with Johnny to get the band Camino into the building and do all these things that like really informed like so many of my later on experiences and continue to inform like how I work now. But, you know, I worked for Greg for 1.5 years or a little under that as his right hand and then started A&Ring things during that process. And then right before the pandemic kind of got the cord cut and have been sort of doing that ever since. But obviously the pandemic is when I kind of stepped into like my full-time A&R role, which honestly, I think served me well in the end. Cause I think I really got to like hone in my craft and understand and start to make records, which was what I always wanted. And, you know, making Chloe's album Blood Bunny was like, which is the first album I ever made, which is a little crazy.
So sick.
It's so insane. It's so crazy. It's like, what?
I'm hearing two things in this.
So yeah.
Finish.
Anyway,
but I know
I'm just
what
saying,
I'm
like,
say.
all of like watching Elektra transition, getting into that family at 2018 and now where we are in 2022, even like now, I don't know if you know, but we've merged with 300 Entertainment, which is enough like, and like, I'm kind of like, again. I'm like, it's like my second rodeo, like, let's go. But I think that attitude of like, whatever's thrown at me, I've got this. And like, whatever's thrown at me, like I have, like I said, like, I know what I want. Like, I know what I want to do. I don't know necessarily how I'm going to get there. Let's be clear.
Sure. But
I'm going to try. Yeah. And I think, you know, you mentioned Johnny earlier, who has been a huge mentor for me and like a friend, honestly. And like someone who's really put their hands up so my foot can step on it to go up. And I mean, I think I already spoke highly of my boss, but he's also someone who really plucked me from, you know,
he saw that early.
Yeah, he saw that early in me. And I think that's also our jobs, by the way, is to see talent in other executives and create a superstar team. Because I think we're super collaborative and like Johnny and I work on a lot of stuff together and like strategize together. And I think you win. And going back to like focusing on people that are on your level or like not getting too concerned with like things you can't reach, you know, what is in your eye line? Like I think people don't look enough at that. And it's the same thing with signings, by the way. Like, why are you trying to, like, people want to sign stuff that is, you know, long far gone or whatever. Like they're chasing something around the block that doesn't want to work with them. Like, someone doesn't want to work with you. That's their loss. Like, you know, you should be developing talent that you really believe in, that believes in you and believes in like what you're capable of bringing to the table for them and with them.
Right. You know, that's exactly what I was going to say is I like this moment in your career and all of you explaining this, I'm obsessed with, but something that I'm hearing in it and like, I'm kind of analyzing it and thinking about it in real time is I think two really important things happened there is you chose the right people.
Yes.
Like more so than a title or a status or a label.
People with a capital P, honestly. Like,
because it's like you instantly, like you and Greg, it was just like, you knew, right?
Yeah,
it was it. That was the person. And it's like, you would never have guessed the progression of the company and where that would take you. Yeah. But there was something there with the people. Yeah. I think that's something like, it's crazy. And then also the fact that throughout this, you knew exactly what you wanted and you said, I want to do this, but I don't hear any sense of entitlement in your story. And you were very clearly just an assistant to start. And you really just owned that and killed it. And I think that's so sick.
Yeah.
Because like just having those two things on lock has gotten you so much now. But it's like that's something you can't force, and like it's I don't know. I mean,
100%. I think I'm a better A&R person now because I was an assistant.
Right.
And I wouldn't know half of the people and the contacts I am with now if I hadn't.
Yeah.
And I think I really made the most of that role. But like,
but then you
to be clear too, like it was frustrating. And I only now on the other side of that hill see that. But I think in the act of it, and this is like for people that are currently assistants or in coordinator roles that are just like, I am drowning. Like, make sure that you're working for someone that has your back.
Yes.
Because if you're just grinding away for no reason, then you are probably being put to work as a mule that isn't growing you. But for the most part, if the person you're working for has your back and is giving you creative work and roles outside of your admin duties, then you're in the right place. Like, stick through it. You've got this. If I wish I could tell young Cat, like, girl, you're fine. Like, you
right,
but I was so stressed and I was so like, I'm so ready to make records and I want this. And there's no rush. Like, there's no rush. Like, I'm still have to tell myself that. Like, I'm still like, there's no rush, you know?
Huge. Coming back to the people, like what you just said there, like, and yes, maybe I have a bias because I love that whole umbrella, even though I don't know Greg personally. I've heard so many great things, but like, the people, like if you had somebody who was a shitty mentor or somebody that just wanted you as the assistant and just saw you as like, here's a capable young mule and I'll give her a ton of work and I don't give a shit where she goes and this helps me, it's very self-serving, that burns you out. It ruins your entire perspective of the music industry. It feels like you can never get anywhere. But it's like, that to me is like the people, like you got that. And now on the other side of it, everything you learned and all of the bullshit you went through makes you this incredibly great A&R that's so qualified. But God, do I respect the Gregs of the world for recognizing young talent and giving you the opportunity to actually grow. Because that's the thing that I think as we continue to grow in our generation, like you always have to pay that forward. And that's so fucking 100%. Huge.
Another thing I'll say is like, aside from the people, like find something amazing. Find something amazing, develop it, tell people like, I'm going to go away for 6 months, a year and bring this back to you with a whole different thing going on around it. And then be like, oh, there's like, because, you know, that was what Chloe was for me. It was like, this is an artist that's never done a writing session in their life, like never whatever in their life. Caterina, do you want to like, and I was, you know, I've been a fan of her since YouTube, but like, I think it's the process of finding the right people, having the right support system, and then taking your own initiative to go and work with someone very talented and prove yourself really, like, and not just be like, the proving of yourself should happen naturally through the growth with the artist.
But I think maybe to that point that like the lesson that maybe you're saying is there's probably going to be opportunities in any professional career where there's like not like the sexiest, coolest artist, like the biggest hypey thing that you are presented. But if you're super passionate about it and you believe in it early and you take that initiative and you build it and you just dig in.
It's more like Chloe didn't come complete on a silver platter. She was like a kid. We laugh now because like, I mean, her growth is amazing. She was a kid. Like she's like, you know, and now she's like fully about to have the biggest year of her career. And it's like, it's amazing. And it's like
crazy. And I'm watching her like,
I mean,
leaps and bounds evolve.
I get worried about like how, like I tell my mom, I'm like, how do you have kids and watch them grow up? Because I'm watching this and I'm already like a wreck. I'm worried about having kids. Like I literally watch her and I'm like I want to cry watching them do anything. Like the New Rules boys always laugh because I like cry in the studio all the time because I'm like, you're just so talented, and they're like, oh my God, like our A&R's crazy. But I really get emotional because it's like, you watch these people change and grow before you. And like, you know, it's like you feel so a part of their journey. And I think it's like one of the greatest joys of my life to watch them grow and their fans grow with them. But she's a great example of like, you know, I'm going to go can I say the F word?
Hell yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I
appreciate
I'm gonna go
that.
fuck off for a second with this artist and bring it back to y'all. And you guys are all gonna. When we made Blood Bunny, like nobody. I didn't think anybody was gonna care. And like Chloe and I talk about that all the time. We're like, we made this album in the thick of the pandemic. Almost every record on that song is a Zoom session.
Wow. And
we just made it, and I loved it, and I knew it was great, and she knew it was great, but we didn't think it would be the number 13 best album in the New York Times, like, you know, of 2021. Like, what? Yeah. To this day, I'm like, wait, pardon? Like, you know, so I think there was an element of like surprise. And even like at the end of the year, we did this like company survey, and it was so cool because like everyone was like, it was like, what were your favorite songs at Elektra over the last year? And like, it was like Monsters All-Time Low and like Girl on TV Chloe Moriondo, and the whole company like voted on that. And it's like to have like, first of all, like the two artists at very different stages in their career, but to have like that support from people and like have that internal excitement about an artist is like something that I think people who are wanting to get into A&R in these buildings earlier in their coordinator assistance positions, like go find that thing for you and find that artist. By the way, not only like do you have to have the vision, like Chloe is the hardest worker I know. She is like so down to do anything it takes, of course, without compromising her integrity, to be huge. And I think you have to find that artist that wants that too, because you can put all the time and effort and energy and ideas and vision into a project. But if that person doesn't want to go execute it, want to go do the interviews and the sessions, it's exhausting. Being an artist is a very difficult job.
Oh, it's like, it's crazy because it's like you have the part of creating and making the fun stuff, but then you have all the bullshit that is not performing or writing songs.
All the pressure.
Yeah.
You know? So I think, and you know, I also want to preface like my story is incredibly unique, like down to finding someone like Greg to work for, down to, you know, working with someone like Chloe from an early stage and having, I mean,
could I not challenge you though? Like, yes, cool. You've gotten a couple lucky moments, but I think that if you hadn't been as passionate and genuine in your journey, you would have had that Greg meeting and he would have been like, well, that's rad. I wish you the best. Have a great career. Right. Like, I think that those like lucky moments are acknowledged and recognized by the real passion.
I don't think about that enough. I do think it is the corny thing of like, you get back the energy you put out into the world.
Yeah.
And by the way, like there's going to be people who meet me and are like, oh, she's not flashy enough. Like she's not enough. Like, yeah, like I got this. You're gonna be a superstar kid. Like I don't want to be I don't want to be that way. Like I have to be a realist. Like, and I'm a pretty idealistic person. But like, you know, and even like, it's been not been hard, but like something I've noticed even recently is like I'm not like that broy A&R. Like I'm like pretty feminine presenting. Like I want to talk about like One Direction and like clothes and like,
again, you know, said it. Yeah, your everything got better when you started leaning into who you
I
were.
Am. And like I'm not gonna sit there and talk about sports. I don't watch sports. I'm gonna sit there and talk about, you know, things that my interests that I connect with. And I've noticed like the Gen Z generation of artists, that's way more their speed, by the way. Yeah. Like they don't like they identify and I think relate to someone like me before they're probably going to relate to your traditional A&R archetype, whatever 100%. That means. And I hope we're dismantling it one by one. But like there is when you close your eyes and you think of that, what that looks like. And I think especially as more queer artists, more trans artists, more artists who had different gender identities and come from different places, and our POC like come into the ether and become the top tier talent. Yeah. They want to work with people who understand them. Yeah. And like people who are like, you know, empathetic and have perspective and like, you know, can really like help take their narrative and disseminate it across the globe in a way that's authentic to them. And like, I think you're going to trust like a young woman with doing that who has like a background like mine more than maybe someone who is just like,
I think you're going to trust anyone who's authentic to that, right? Like that's my thing is like, I don't give a fuck who you are, what you look like, any of that background. It's like, I want to work with the people that are authentic to the shit that I love.
Yeah. And and to that point too, it's like, I just said that, but then I also was thinking like, I've had so many people tell me like, well, yeah, of course, you're a woman. That's why they, they probably related to you more. And it's like, being a woman is like, I hope, the last interesting thing about me.
Right.
Like, it's like, how about where I'm from, what I stand for, what I like, all these things about me that like, even like, you can still be an incredibly intuitive A&R and be a straight white male. Like, it has nothing to do with like your identity. It has to do with like educating yourself, your perspective, and looking for talent that you can uplift in different communities. Like, going back to community, it all comes back to that. Modern community for this generation is, uplifting people of color, uplifting queer voices, like doing stuff. And I talk about this all the time, like in our A&R meetings. I'm like, we have to. And even like, I'm so proud of like the Fueled by Ramen roster and where it's going, from Meet Me at the Altar to we just signed The Blossom, to Chloe. It's like a very like badass, like different gender identities, people of color, like this really like, honestly, the modern version of badass, which is what Fueled by Ramen's always been. Yeah. And so I think it's something that I talk about very vocally in our building, is like, we got to be signing stuff. And I think diversity is such a thrown around word. It's like, it shouldn't be in pursuit of like, diversity to like say you're diverse. Yeah.
That's what I feel is like, that's every time. Like, that's why I'm such a fan of everyone in that building and everything that everyone's doing, is because you can't fake it. The reason why the artists are there that is because everyone they work with, not just you, not just Greg, Johnny, like everyone there truly gives a shit.
But people listen too. Right. And I think that's like, if or when one day I'm in a position like Greg, I'm gonna hire little Caterinas who understand things that I don't understand. Like, like I'm very aware that one day I will be old, and one day I will be not as tapped in. And even like, I actually have a I noticed that the scouting consulting portion of our business was A, something I didn't know existed until I worked at a label, but B, very skewed in one direction of like hiring sort of like, specifically men from like places that like schools with really elite music business programs.
Interesting.
Who were on a certain pocket of the internet, had certain connections. And I was like, why do those kids keep getting hired? Like, I would have been an amazing scout in college. I want to go to colleges and find girls who are having basement shows and are online and doing all these things and like really know like what's next. So I went to Greg and I was like, I want to hire, X amount of women at these colleges across the country to kind of scout for me. Are you cool? And he was like, go to whoever you need. So I actually have a whole network of women underneath me that are all in college. And I think that like perspective is so important. And it really is like my version of like trying to like change the course of like,
that's fucking
what's
awesome.
Normal, because they're going to graduate and have A&R experience.
Yeah.
I graduated with no A&R experience.
Yeah.
And like, I think that there's a lot of people that see that and are like, well, it was hard for me, so it has to be hard for you. Ugh. And I think that's really toxic and really, really dangerous.
It sucks.
Really dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like not something I ever want. But I think, you know what, though? I think that mentality comes from when you're unhappy. And I think I will never feel that way because I'm happy with what I'm doing. Like, I'm happy with the things I've found and things I work on. So why am I gonna, another young woman who's in front of me who wants to do something, I'm gonna make it hard for her? Like, no, I want her to feel like she can discover things. And by the way, everyone's ear is their own.
Right.
Like, my ear is my ear because, once again, my parents did not have good taste in music.
You had to go figure it out
they
yourself.
Listen to this. Like, they do. They have great taste. But my ear is my ear because it's shaped. Your ear is, people always say like, oh, you have to have a good ear. Your ear is good because it's all your experiences of your life wrapped into one, and it's how you're experiencing it. And so it's like, to that point, like, how can I be upset if someone with a great ear and ambition wants to be successful? Like, if I can put them in position to be that way, that's great.
Everybody wins.
It's great.
Literally everybody wins.
And I hope
music gets better. Yeah.
And I hope I get to keep doing that. It's also like, that's our job with artists, is to put them in positions to be successful.
Yeah.
If you can't do that for your counterparts in the business, then how are you gonna do that for your artists?
Right.
Because that's literally our job, is to give them opportunities and resources and a clear path to become whatever they want to be, which is, you know, hopefully for everybody a big artist, you know?
I'm so inspired by that. Like I got so quiet in that little pocket because I was just like, please keep going. Like you have such a great mindset towards that. And like, I don't know, like that's, to me, doing this podcast is like, I just want to hear from more people like yourself. And I want to inspire, like, again, it doesn't have to be music. I don't care. But like, I just love hearing from the people that have like really found that thing that they fucking love and are making genuine waves towards like adding to that and continuing making the thing you love better. And I had that feeling about you, and this podcast has confirmed that tenfold. So it's just fucking cool to hear all that, you know?
No, it's so cool. I think like this is one of my favorite things, is hearing other people's stories and like honestly helping people. Like I am a firm 2 on the Enneagram. I am such a helper. Like that's all I want to do. And it's why I think I fell into this job, is like, I just want to like get great people into great positions. And I mean that for artists and for others. And I think like, I don't know. It's funny that you said, because I always like, my story's unique. I just got lucky. And like, I think I need to be better about like, no, like I've put in the like I show up and I'm me. And by the way, like I also want to be clear, like not everybody likes that. Like not everybody is comfortable with like someone that's going to be themselves.
But you'll find that. And I've learned,
and like, you know, there's been plenty of instances where I feel like I have to change who I am to fit in somewhere in this business. And I've learned just time and time again, like it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to just show up and be yourself. And that does mean you're going to lose sometimes, and you're going to lose. You're gonna win. You're not gonna win.
Yeah.
But when you win, you're gonna win with the things that make sense for you. And my one really good friend once told me, like, when you accept that if it didn't come to you, it just wasn't made for you, like it makes it so much easier to be like okay with it. Like I didn't get it. It wasn't made for me. It's fine. I was never supposed to be with it anyway.
Yeah.
As long as people can just work on what their true voice is and use that as their megaphone to get into this business, like that is, I can promise you, like you can network with all the people, send all your demo links, do all the things, whatever. The main thing that's going to get you forward is being yourself and like meeting other people that understand that about you.
That's fucking great.
It's cool. It is. Great. I feel like I've said the word corny 50 times in this podcast, but I feel like
I have a couple of those. I have a couple of words like that are like reoccurring. Yeah. I'm like, I'll listen back and I'm like, I say that a lot.
I'm like, but it's true.
There's like the theme of a podcast. You'll get like a specific word. Like I remember I did one, and the theme of the word was vignettes. Like my God, count the amount of times we said that word. It's fun. I like it.
Literally.
I like it.
I mean, I feel really lucky. You know, everyone I work with is like on such an exciting path, and I just feel super lucky. Like I've said that word now a lot too, but just like fortunate to work with things that honestly I actually listen to. Yeah. Which is something that is rare.
But again, I think that's because of a lot of things that you have very much done. Like that's not necessarily by accident. So I think that's cool. It's a cool example to set. Where can everybody find you?
They can find me on Instagram.
Perfect.
At Caterina.
Yep.
Caterina, but with 3 as the E. That's probably where you're gonna reach me best.
Cool.
I live in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm a woman of the world. I'm everywhere.
Yeah, here we are in LA.
That's probably the best place.
Yeah, I always like it when people like yourself take the time to come on a podcast. I always encourage my listeners, like if you genuinely got something from this, it's always cool. I'm like, yo, like send them a DM, let them know that you.
100%.
I think that's
open
cool.
door.
It's really sweet. And a lot of people that are willing.
So thoughtful. Yeah.
So, yeah. If you got something out of this, let her know.
100%. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for doing this. This was awesome.
It was the best. You're the best.
There it is, Caterina's story. Like I said there at the end, I really do love it when people who listen to the podcast hit up guests like Caterina, because this was her first ever podcast. Like she doesn't have to do stuff like this. A lot of times roles like this are a lot more behind the scenes. And I love and admire people who take the time to share these stories and this wisdom, all with the intention to help and make the next generation of music a better place. So if you got something from this, make sure to hit her up and let her know. For real, that means a lot. Outside of that, if you've been getting value out of the podcast in general, do me the massive favor of sharing it with friends, continuing to do so, continuing to tell more and more people about it, and growing this via word of mouth is something that really, really helps me. As of right now, I put more money into the podcast than I get out of it. And that's okay. I don't mind that because it's something that I'm genuinely passionate about, and I want to continue to do this and share stories like this. But the way that it's possible to keep going is by growing it, and that is a group effort. So spreading the word on social media, supporting on the Patreon if you want to, leaving 5-star reviews wherever you listen, subscribing, that really, really does make it all worth it. So if you haven't done that already and you're down, please do it. It's super helpful. Thank you for listening. As always, I'll be back next week with another episode.